Hello, Oscillator Sync here. There are a few electronic instruments that you could justifiably call iconic, instruments that you could recognise at a distance or through a crude drawing. The Minimo would be one, probably a Juno, an 808, like an MS-20 I would say, probably DX7 as well. There's another instrument that I think you could justifiably put in that category, and that would be the original Stylophone. The benefit that the Stylophone has, I think, is that it would be identifiable even to lay people who weren't into electronic instruments. Now, the original Stylophone you probably couldn't really call a synth. It had no sort of sound shaping functionality. It was a monophonic electronic organ, I guess you would say. But one of the more modern Stylophone instruments that you can call a synth, I think, would be the Gen X-1. The Gen X-1 added a filter, some delay, an envelope, some sub-octaves, some PWM, an LFO. Yeah, this thing is a synth, and I like the Gen X-1 a lot, and I've used it a lot in making music. It has a particular sort of burbly, slightly unstable sound to its oscillators. The filter's kind of a bit dirty and can whistle. The delay is deliciously dirty, actually. And yeah, it offers a texture that I don't easily get from other instruments I have. So yeah, I'm a fan of the Gen X-1. I've used it a fair bit. It fits a particular niche in the instruments that I have. And that's why it's pretty exciting. The Gen X-2 has just been announced, and Dubreq have very kindly sent me over actually two of them, which was a mistake, but there we go, two Gen X-2s to make a video on. I'm not getting otherwise paid for this video, but I do get to keep the synthesizer, so I will mark this as a sponsored video. The Gen X-2 takes the original Gen X-1 and keeps almost every single feature that it had. There's one that's kind of slightly changed, but adds a bunch of new features, and in particular, it adds CV and gate control, both incoming and outgoing, so you can use it both as a controller for CV compatible instruments and also control it, which I'm doing here using the Korg SQ1. On top of the CV control, it also adds an Octave Switch, so you can quickly switch octaves, something that was frustrating to do on the original Gen X-1 because you had to retune the entire thing. That's very, very welcome. This Touchstrip now has a slightly different functionality, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail later. But it keeps all of the other stuff that I liked about the original in terms of its slightly funky sound, its dirty delay. Yeah. And in this video, we're going to do a full overview of it. We'll talk about the basic functionality in terms of how it sounds, how it behaves, how the features all interact, and then we will use it with other instruments. We'll take a look at what we can do with the CV control to bring it into other systems, both in terms of making it work with other CVable instruments, and we'll also, I'll get the Eurorack out and we'll try and make a super Stylophone synth. So there will be chapter markers in the video description if you want to jump around. So let's get to it. So I'm sure most people are familiar with the basic premise of the Stylophone, but if you're not, you have this metal keyboard here. It doesn't make any noise if you touch it with a finger, but you also have this metal stylo, where when you touch it to the keyboard, it completes the circuit. And you can sound a note. So that's the basic sound of the Stylophone. The Gen X-2 and the Gen X-1 before it added a bunch of other ways we can alter the sound. The main and most obvious one would be the filter now. It's a low-pass filter with resonance. It sounds like it's kind of a ladder design because as you turn up the resonance, you lose on the bottom end. goes well into self-oscillation. And we'll do something with that self-oscillation later, I think. But yeah, it's certainly a way to smooth out the sound. If we want to affect how the filter is actually working, we have our envelope here. So I can give it a bit of attack and a bit more decay. And we get that nice little swoop in. We can make it longer, more dramatic, perhaps with a bit of resonance. Lovely. Or we can make it a lot pluckier, turn the attack down, turn the decay down, maybe go around the back here to the octave switch to go down an octave. Sort of a nice plucky bass sound. Cool. So we have our envelope here. The envelope can also be sent to the pitch by turning up this pitch knob. Quite a wide range. But you can use it to make sort of your laser snaps or a little sort of swoop in. Which is nice. The other way we can affect the filter is through the LFO, which will also affect the pitch. One thing I really like doing with the LFO is setting it to the square wave and finding an octave. Out there. Kind of get that sort of video game thing going on. This gets more fun actually as you start to introduce the sub-octave. So you've got a great video game vibes. That's the 2 octave down. So I've got a 1 octave down. Bring them both in. We've also got a pulse width modulation type effect here. That's also affected by the LFO. If we turn the depth down so it's not doing anything to the pitch, you can hear that the rate also affects that pulse width modulation. Adds quite a nice bit of thickness to things. And when you bring in the octaves as well, yeah, and we've also, of course, got the delay. The delay's got quite a good range. The level, I think, actually acts a bit like a mix because it does seem to attenuate the original sound at the far end. So you've got sort of your normal kind of delay stuff. At the end, it gets noisy. So I think it's one of those PT karaoke type chips. And you've got your slapback type things down at the very bottom there, and you can kind of get like a metallic kind of fake reverb. With the repeats up high and the time down low. With a little bit of luck with the time knob, you can kind of get a little tweak. While it's delaying to give you kind of like a chorusing vibrato kind of thing. And the repeats do quite rightly go all the way up into rollover self-oscillation for all that kind of sonic madness, which I personally love. So on the original GX1, you had this kind of touch strip here, and this basically just played the oscillator, but a bit like a theremin, so you didn't have the fixed keys going on there. That's still present sort of physically on the Gen X-2, but it's doing something slightly different. So this is now like a multi-function touch strip that can affect different aspects of the synth. So what this touch strip does depends on a switch on the back. So I guess the default mode here, just turn down some of the delay here, is kind of a pitch bend. So you kind of got a pitch bend lever here. You also have, I think it's in this direction, secondary control over the filter if you want to have the filter in a fixed place, but then have a way to swoop things without having to affect your original point. This is particularly useful when you are sequencing it. And then I think in this direction you have control over the LFO depth. So you can, if we set this to be a vibrato, faster than that. You have control over that, and you can go negative as well. So a slightly different bit of functionality on the touch strip here. Probably ultimately more useful when you use it with all the CV stuff, but as I mentioned, I kind of quite miss the original functionality. It's kind of the only thing that's missing on the Gen X-2. I've already mentioned you've also got an Octave Switch at the back here. Super useful because you used to have to retune the entire instrument in order to move it into a different register. No longer a problem. I think one criticism that you can fairly level at the Stylophone is that it's not an instrument that is easy to integrate into a wider system if you're trying to do sequencing, which is why I think probably the headline feature on the new Gen X-2 are these CV inputs and outputs. So we have CV inputs for pitch, gate, and also the filter, and CV outputs for pitch and gate. So you can use this both to control other synths or maybe a modular system, and also be controlled by other things. And I think probably the main one that you might consider is controlling it with a sequencer, of course. So I've got my trusty Korg SQ1 here. I think this is a nice common sequencer that can also be MIDI clockable, or provide MIDI clock. And coming in here, we can take a CV input and put it into the pitch. And we'll hear nothing because there's no gate. And we could make a gate by actually playing a note. And then we'll get a sustained sequence playing there. Now, one thing that's kind of a shame is that it'd be really, really neat if the keyboard CV was added to the input, or if you could make it be added to the input, because then you could transpose sequences as it is. You can't. You could do that with the touch strip, though, of course. If we want it to actually play on its own, as it were, we'll need to add a gate sequence, and I'll take the gate output of the second track here on the SQ1 and plug it into my gate input here. Now we have a sort of self-playing sound. Now, it kind of sounds like the notes have a decay. They kind of don't, actually. If we take away our envelope and just open up the filter, you can hear that these are gates, right? Hard on off, basically. Turn off the delay. But you can kind of fake it being an actual sort of enveloped note with the filter. So if we have the filter turned down low enough, we have an appropriate envelope decay, maybe it's a bit of attack pads, then you can kind of make it sound like it's enveloped with a VCA, even though it's not. It's just strictly on or off. Put the delay back in. So on my SQ1 I can adjust the duty of the gates, which is just the length of the gates, and that will change the length of the notes. You can also, on this sequence, the duty length, so you could have different length notes. Sequence, it's not the way I've got it set up at the moment. We may as well also take the other CV out here and have that sequenced filter, I think. Of course, we can change what our sequence looks like. Change our gate pattern. Yeah, good fun. You don't have to plumb all of these things in, of course. We could take out the pitch, and you're still going to have it play notes. The cool thing here is that we could just play the rhythm out. If we want a different rhythm, we can put a different gate pattern. Unfortunately, when you let go, it's going to end up on whatever the 0 point is, which is you need to carry on playing for that to work, or stop the sequencer. And there are a couple of things we can do with the CV control, even without sort of external patching, that's quite neat. And my favourite and most simple implementation here is that we can add filter tracking to the Stylophone. And the way we can do that is take the pitch output and patch that into the filter input. And what that's going to give us is, if we turn the filter down, a keyboard where the filter opens up as we go up the keyboard. So if we unpatch this, the filter is consistent, but with it patched in. Gets brighter at the top, darker at the bottom. Which is just a really nice thing. I'd almost be inclined to say that just leave this patched in if you're not using the CV for anything else, because I think it makes it a more playable instrument. Filter tracking is always nice. Higher notes are brighter in the physical world usually, so that kind of makes sense. But of course, there's a bunch of other things we can do with this CV control. So for example, here I have the Decade Bridge SN, the tin, which is a little monophonic 3-operator FM synth. And we can use this as an additional oscillator in the Gen X-2. So I can grab a patch cable, and coming out of the pitch output, I can go into the CV for the carrier pitch. That's our main sort of pitch, if you like, on the instrument in most cases. I can take my gate output, and that can go into the VCA input here. And then I can take the output of the tin and bring it into the aux input on the side of the Stylophone. The aux input on the Stylophone also sends stuff through the filter and through the delay if it's turned on, which kind of brings everything together as one single voice. So if I turn the tin down for a second, there's the Stylophone on its own, and if I turn it back up, now we should have an extra oscillator, and we have CV control over it, but we can also obviously change the way that it is reacting. And the nice thing here, as I say, it's going through the filter and delay, and actually, thankfully, the Octave Switch also affects the CV out, which is, thank goodness, that would be really annoying if it didn't. So yeah, we can bring in another synth as an extra oscillator on the Gen X-2. Now, as I mentioned towards the beginning of the video, Dubreq sent me 2 of these, which was an accident, but it's a happy accident because it allows me to do something a bit mad and fun, which I'm going to do right now. Because does the phrase super mega stereo stylophone mean anything to you? Because it does to me right now in this moment. So I've got the 2 stylophones out. I have tuned them the same. I've set their settings as close as possible. There's obviously going to be variations and tolerances involved, which is kind of part of the magic. And one of them's acting as the leader. So this one has its CV and gate coming out, and it's going into the follower here with the CV and gate inputs. So at the moment, this is just what one of them sounds like. Which is all good and fine. But if I plug the other one in, now we're going to have this. A glorious stereo stylophone party. We can start to introduce other sort of changes to things, so we might change the pitch wobble on one of them. Maybe introduce some of the other as well. Let's get some more sort of chorusing. It's already stereo. Add a big reverb on it. Envelope. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I suspect you could tell someone this was a more expensive synth and they would believe you. Bit of resonance. Can try and balance it, but it doesn't matter if we're out a little bit. Maybe turn on the other sub oscillator. I think I like to do one more. Yeah. What I'm saying is you need 2 of them, probably. Yeah, it's really good fun. Okay, let's pair it with some Eurorack. Let's get silly. So I've got the old Eurorack out, and the first thing I thought I would give a go is using the Stylophone to control a patch. So I've patched up a little sort of 2 oscillator monosynth thing. It's Platts and the 2HP going together into the ADAC system dual filter, going into Octave as a VCA, and then out of the system, no effects or anything like that. And I've taken the pitch and gate out, and I've malted them to a couple of different places. The pitch is getting malted to the volts per octave of the oscillators. The gate is getting malted to two different envelopes that I've built on stages here. And yep, if we start playing, we can control things. An interesting thing that I noticed is that the LFO still gets sent on the pitch output, which is cool, actually. I like that, and probably accounted for why things sounded particularly wide when I started using that with the stereo stylophone. Now, here's where I have to level a criticism. I'll just open up the filter, it's a bit easy to hear. When I let go, this stops sending whatever you were holding down, and it goes back down to, I guess, 0 volts. What's down here? So yeah, the way you would fix this in a sort of a modular world is by using a sample and hold. But no matter what I did with the sample and hold, I tried 2 different sample and holds, I couldn't get it to track properly. I think that's because there is some kind of delay between the gate disappearing and the pitch changing down, perhaps. If I could maybe do a gate to trigger, that might work better, but I don't have enough modules in this rack anyway to get that done. So that's a bit of a shame. It would be nice if the pitch did actually hold in this case when you were controlling things. The other thing I will also say is that even with that in place, the calibration is not super good. That's not the best tracking up to octaves, to be honest. So although it would be fun to use this to sort of control something more seriously in a modular system, there are some issues as it stands with the way it operates. I don't know whether inside there are trim pots for calibrating the keyboard. There may be. I haven't had a chance to open it up yet. But let's go the other way. Let's control the stylophone using the modular system instead. So let's patch something up in real time where I can use the oscillators of the Gen X-2 and then put them through some other stuff. So first things first, I've just sorted this out. The output on the Gen X-2 is not a fan of a mono cable, so you do have to use a stereo splitter to get a signal out of it in the first instance, but I have now got it running into my modular system. Now I just want to use this as an oscillator essentially, so I want it just to hold its gate open the whole time. So the easiest way that I can do that is just send an offset into the gate here. So I've just got an offset coming out here, and it's just going to come in here. So this is now going to drone. In terms of a pitch sequence, let's grab this output here from PAMS. Cool, yeah. So we've got it playing a sequence now. Let's patch up a couple of other bits to make things make sense. So I've got a gate pattern here. And I'll pop it in here. That'll give us a envelope. We can take that envelope and run that into Aikido's CV in here. We'll take the output of that input like that. We'll put that into Aikido rather, and then I'll take the output out here. And now we've got the stylophone with an actual envelope on it. Let's put the sub-octave in because that always sounds cool. Lovely stuff. We might want to add a filter onto that as well. Could do the filtering in here, but it's not going to... yeah, we could do the filtering here. Let's do the filtering in here actually. let's mult that envelope. Which way have I done that? I've gone backwards. Yes. What I mean is I'm going to mult the envelope. Send that back into Aikido. Good. And then I can take that envelope and bring it into the filter input here. So we could have the internal filter working, but if we wanted instead to use a different filter, we could take that, put it into filter, put that into the CV, and then come out of the, say, low pass back into here. And now we can use a different filter with the oscillator core, but the PWM in there. Perfectly nice sounding oscillator that we've got there now. Watch my signal there, it's a bit kind of hot. And then we can start doing all of the other stuff. One thing I wanted to find out actually is if I take my pitch signal, put it into my filter, does the filter track volts per octave? Let's find out. So if we come over here on PAMs, that should be fifths and octaves. So it sounds like it's tracking volts per octave-ish towards the bottom, but not up at the top. Okay, so that answers that question. You can use the delay as part of the sound as well. Okay, it's all like a physical modelling thing, which is cool. So I think in the context of like a wider Eurorack space, this is a perfectly good sounding oscillator core. The oscillator tracks okay, the filter doesn't track volts per octave. But you know, nothing wrong with that as a basic sound. If you need an extra, some cool pings going there with the you need an extra oscillator for a Eurorack system and you happen to have one of these handy, it's a cool sounding oscillator, right? Especially with the sub-octave. I already really liked the original Gen X1. It was by no means the most fully featured instrument that I had. You could even argue that it was imperfect or flawed. You know, the oscillators burbled and didn't always track perfectly and crackled in interesting ways. The filter rang out with its resonance a little bit too easily. The delay was dirty and resonant. And yet it's all of those things together that made it compelling to me, because it filled an experiential and sonic niche that really no other instrument that I have fills. It is the classic stylophone experience, but for people that like synths. And the good news is that the Gen X-2 doesn't take away any of that good stuff. And adding the CV control is really, really smart, because it allows you to bring it into a wider music making world where you might want to integrate it with other instruments and sequencers in ways that it was pretty much impossible to do with the original Gen X1 without some hacks or modding. Ultimately though, from the moment I got this out of the box, what I was doing more than making music was having fun. It is a fun synth. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It doesn't try to compete with the more grown-up synths. And yet, I do find myself wanting to use it. Generally in tandem with other more grown-up synths, sure, but it is a nice thing. It makes me feel happy to use it. Arguably, it makes me feel happier quicker than a lot of other instruments do that require more work to make me feel happy. So for that, I think it should be applauded, and much like the original Gen X1, I'm certain that I will find places where I will want to use it in my serious music, but also have fun doing that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Probably ended up being a bit long for a video that is about a stylophone, but here we are. If you did enjoy the video, then as always, a like and a subscribe is massively appreciated. And other than that, I guess thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.